Hey, this is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful tech leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode was brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Hi there, everyone. I am Carolina Toth, and this is the Level Up Engineering Podcast. I am happy to have Taavi Rehemägi with me today, but before we start, I would like to just give you a little disclaimer. I've been really intrigued by the idea of video content, and so now, if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, you can check us out on YouTube as well and see us in a video, which is kind of exciting. But I really would love for having your feedback, love for you to share your feedback, something like that. And so for us to keep going with this video format, we would love to hear from you. And if you don't like it, then we will not do it anymore. So we are in an experimenting phase right now, but the original podcast format is still available, so you can check us out on Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. With that said, without further ado, let me welcome our guest today, Taavi Rehemägi. He is CEO and co-founder of Dashbird, and he will tell us a bit more about the company. But today's topic is from tech lead to CEO, and we have him with the background of having started coding at the age of 14 and having started his company just now. So stick with us if you are an aspiring CEO and you are right now working as a developer. Welcome, and please tell us a bit about yourself.
Hey, Carolina. Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here, and definitely the first video guest is also interesting, so let's see how that goes. So a bit about my own background. As you said, I've been a developer for most of my life before and worked at all sorts of different technical roles in different startups. Been in tech for over 10 years now. Built different products and worked with different engineers with different technologies. And 3 years ago, since the past 3 years, I've been the co-founder and CEO of Dashbird. We started Dashbird in 2018, and it's been a journey. We've come quite a long way since when we started. We raised venture capital, we built a world-class team, we've launched products, acquired customers, done a lot of kind of the early stage activities that a startup goes through, and it's been quite the ride. I'm happy to talk about my experience and also about the company. Would you like me to briefly go over what Dashbird does as well?
Sure, let's do that.
Sure. So Dashbird is also a tool for developers. So I think this is what makes me kind of qualified to be its CEO, or that's how we kind of came up to it as well. So Dashbird is a monitoring and insights overview platform for distributed cloud applications. We work with companies who are hosting their applications on top of serverless infrastructures in AWS, and we provide visibility and understanding into how the application is operating. All of the failures are being reported by Dashbird, and we help companies to operate and fix and maintain and improve their applications. It's kind of like Datadog, but for serverless.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for that clarification. And with that said, you mentioned that you are qualified to be an expert in this area, but please tell us a bit about how your current role as CEO is different from a software engineering role.
Yeah, sure. So it's completely different. So it's a completely different world. And I also was thinking before this call, right, just now, that nobody's ever really qualified to be the CEO for the first time. I think I've noticed this, among other founders. It's like, doesn't matter if you come from sales or product management or whatever other discipline, like becoming a CEO and kind of, doing stuff across the board, across like from acquiring customers, go to market strategy, to product, to fundraising. Like unless you've actually done those things, like everybody is starting from pretty much the same place. And it's the transition, I think for me, was a bit gradual, but also like feet first into cold water a little bit. So when we started, obviously the first kind of 6 months was mainly just building the product and thinking about how the product should work and things like that. But after that, I transitioned into more like a full-time CEO role, which meant raising money, which was this whole kind of a journey that I did for the first time in my life. After that, building the team, iterating on the product strategy, and forming the go-to-market activities early on in the company. And then over time, I think my role has been basically working on each one of those areas again and again and iterating. So it's been product, hiring, fundraising, go-to-market, sales, talking to customers, being at webinars, podcasts, as we are right now. So,
So your role, I am assuming, is a lot more versatile in the sense that when you code, you also can use a lot of different aspects of coding and libraries and different languages or different databases, whatever. But now you have to kind of use different aspects of your personality, if that makes sense. Like building a business kind of wants you to just do different things.
Yeah, I think it's kind of basically being a generalist. So having an opinion on, like, I don't even have as much opinions anymore around the development side. Like I trust engineers to do what they do best, and I don't, go into their meetings and say like, hey, we need to do this in that way or something like this. But it's basically having an opinion and kind of working on different disciplines. I think over time, this has transitioned more to be like around product strategy and kind of how to win in any market. What do the customers really care about? Where's the kind of the biggest pain points? And then also around how do you actually take a product to market? And so I think over time, those kinds of focus areas are also shifting as well. So they start out being really product focused. Over time, moving into the business side, and it's a lot about people. Like 80% is just about managing or talking to people, having different conversations.
Yeah, that's amazing. Especially when you think about the general perception of who a developer is. Now you mainly just have to talk to people. So with that said, let me dig into a little bit about your story. What made you want to start Dashbird? How did the idea came around?
Yeah. So the roots of Dashbird are actually, we were working on this other company, or like not as founders, but as team members in the engineering organization. And we happened to be building on serverless, which serverless is a really new kind of technology trend. It got started really in 2017, 2016. And at that time already, we were like building quite a meaningful application on serverless. And that enabled us to kind of see the future a little bit. We were ahead of the curve. Not a lot of people were building stuff on it at that time, which we saw that this is here to stay. Like serverless is a meaningful trend in cloud computing. There's a market that's emerging here and the community, but also enabled us to see the challenges that other organizations are going to face down the line. So being a couple of years ahead of time, we were seeing like, hey, like 2 years from now, there's going to be a lot of organizations facing the same challenges. Let's try to build something that would solve some of the challenges and like what we would ourselves use. And it was like, started out as just something, can we build it? Could this work? Can we use it for ourselves? And then after doing that, we kind of tried to put it out there, and it kind of started gaining traction. People started using it. There was like really positive feedback, and kind of organic interest towards the product early on, which then like grew quite organically, and it was obvious that there is something there. Obviously, the strategy and the complexity of that product early on is nothing compared to what it is now, and like we've gone through like tens of iterations or hundreds of different like changes to form it into like a more mature company.
Right. So am I correctly hearing that it wasn't really you wanting to become a CEO per se, it was just kind of an emergent quality of you creating a product that you thought was needed?
Yeah. So as a group of founders, like it wasn't like an ambition to. I think there was an ambition to do a company, to do a startup. I think that was there, but it wasn't like we need to do it at any cost. It was like we knew that we want to do it at some point in our lives, and you're like looking for a right opportunity, and then Dashbird kind of came along. And like the decision to be the CEO wasn't like I have this ambition. It was kind of that we settled into, like, the other co-founder was working on the tech side more, and kind of organically went into that. Yeah, I think I didn't even acknowledge it as much in the beginning. It was all like, yeah.
It kind of happened. So would you say that you were kind of like an open person as a developer as well? Like, would you say that you were more comfortable speaking and standing up in front of crowds than your fellow developers?
I think a little bit, yes. I think that's always been one of my qualities in a way, or yeah, but I don't know if that matters as a quality for a CEO. I get maybe a little bit, because you need to be able to go out into the world and talk to customers and to VCs and to convince people to join your startup in terms of funding, or customer or employee. So I think that's really important.
So what are some of the essential skills that you need as a CEO?
I think every kind of early stage startup needs a founder who would go out into the world and get people excited about it. I think that you need, like, it's also in YC, what they say is your startup needs one evangelical founder who's able to go out into the world and basically sell it. But you still need a CTO who's really strong, like, and like the other, like the go-to-market people, like they are just as important. So like it alone is not enough, but you need different disciplines. But they say that it's hard to succeed wildly or like really big without this kind of founder. So I think that's the main role of a CEO.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that you and the CTO really come together and help each other out in different aspects of the company?
Yeah, I think we definitely have a really good chemistry with the management team right now, and I think that the skills are definitely complementary, and the interests are also complementary. So like we work on the product together, and I think I do like the everything with the investors and customers, and like he Marek focuses more on the product and engineering. So definitely a good fit.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say is your most exciting part to the role of CEO? What is it that was added to your life by becoming the CEO?
I think it's like a lot of things. I think two main things is watching other people succeed basically in your team, or like as customers. Like when we built the engineering team that's releasing really good products month in and month out, and kind of succeeding, or like people in the marketing team, and I think that, seeing that and kind of feeling a little bit responsible is quite amazing. And I think the other thing is like looking at putting together different functions into a company that's kind of running like an orchestra or something. Like you take like individual pieces of teams and like areas, and then that forms kind of beautifully into a company, which is really nice to see on a kind of like on like a third person view,
Right.
in a way. I think that's interesting.
Thank you. With that said, do you have and excuse me if this is like too personal, but like, do you have a longing for the developers' work, like what you did as an IC, for example? Do you feel like you want to go back, or do you ever go back?
On the weekend, when I have time, I just play around and like do random coding sessions sometimes. Not even on dashboards, just on like projects, or like just play around, like do challenges. Don't think I would want to go back full time. I think that it's kind of like a really challenging role, but it's also like really interesting. And I think I'm exposed to a lot of interesting people and like things to do, and I'm enjoying it. And I think it's becoming easier over time. So I think the first 1.5 years, I was like, I would have gone back. I think now it's you're getting used to it, and it's becoming more interesting. Or like it was interesting, but yeah.
Now it's becoming perhaps a bit more like your comfort zone, and you're feeling more comfortable.
Yeah, you're starting to understand what you need to do.
Nice. So are there any mistakes that you're willing to share with your listeners that you made along the way when you were transitioning into this position? And is there something that you would like to do differently?
Yeah, I think there's been a ton of mistakes. I think also the perspective of like usually the perspective of people is like, when you're making mistakes, is you're only remember the mistakes, and kind of looking back at the 3 years, like all I can see is mistakes right now. Obviously there has been a lot of success as well, and like for every bad decisions there's like maybe 10 good decisions. But obviously doing an early stage startup is not as glamorous as it might look like, and you end up making mistakes, and struggling. For me, I think the biggest mistakes were done early on, with maybe like sales or marketing strategies that were like we didn't know what we were doing exactly, and kind of losing momentum in some places, or making like strategically wrong decisions in some cases. And yeah, I think that we've always been good with engineering. So because that's what we know. We know how to hire engineers. We know what the customer wants in a large part. I think growing into what works in sales and what works in marketing has been the most difficult. But also the mistakes that I've made don't seem like obvious mistakes at the time. Like you don't know enough information at the time you're doing those mistakes to prevent them really as well. So now with experience, I can see them. But yeah, you're gonna get scars when you're doing an early stage startup, definitely.
Okay, but it seems like you learn from them in hindsight, right?
Yeah, I think yes, but there's always new mistakes to make.
Nice.
As well. So
There is
not the new, definitely.
a bright future ahead of us. So you mentioned quite a few things. Let me do a little summary of what we have seen because I've heard from you that it's important to kind of complement each other within the team, right? So you and the co-founder have to find the niche in which you have to participate to make the company the best it can be. And then I feel like you really mentioned without saying it that you have to keep an open mind to all parts of the business, kind of. As a CEO, it sounds like you learned a lot about product strategy and marketing, as you mentioned, and just like how to run it all, and all the while keeping a close pair of eyes on the product, right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail there, actually. So I think in the space we are operating, like just in my experience and kind of the reality of most markets today is that you need to have a really smart strategy, and kind of you need to hit the niche and some sort of a wave or a vertical or something that other people don't see. And you need to be the best and kind of nail every discipline, from like product strategy to pricing to go to market, to be able to escape kind of the death valley of what like early stage startups go through, and to kind of go to the next stages, like to grow to next stages of the company. Each of those kind of disciplines or parts of the company need to work together really well. So you need to constantly iterate on, like, until it's basically perfect. Because I think, not having done a company 10 years ago, it seemed to me that at that point markets were less competitive, and like you could get away with like some inefficiencies maybe in the strategy or in the products. But now it's like, if you're in that stage where the company is like weak and it's fighting for its life, you need to keep in mind every aspect of the business. And I think later it will get easier as it gets stronger and you're able to attract talent into each one of those like areas.
So do you, if you can dig a little deeper in how the company looks like right now, do you have like specific departments and people responsible for those departments only?
Yeah, so I think we have quite a good structure for a company of our stage. So we do have, like, the product functionality is divided by some people, mainly the CTO and me are working on the product. We have engineers, we have like an architect's role. Then going into the go-to-market side, we have head of marketing, we have a marketing specialist, we have an account executive. So all of the disciplines, and like an SDR as well, or customer success. So we kind of have all of the functions figured out, and then we're kind of iterating each one of those areas of the business basically on a weekly basis, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned iteration quite a few times, and I think it's familiar to all of us working in IT. But I want to ask you if you can pinpoint specifics about your skills as an engineer that you took with you and used in your role as a CEO.
I think there probably are some. I think what enables it, like iteration and learning from past activities, is tracking all of the things you do and the results, and forming, what if you do something, what do you expect it to change, or what do you expect the result to be, and then kind of week after week or month after month reviewing those activities and those results, and continuously learning. So I think in the first couple of years as a company, the main thing you're actually doing is learning about what kind of works, and forming a strategy that is viable in this space. So it's all about the data and kind of making logical decisions. So programmers are good in that.
Yeah. So a lot like what engineers do. You also mentioned the importance of strategy, and even though I'm not even an engineer, I feel like strategy is a word that's used a lot, but maybe it's not as crystal clear to everyone. And I am wondering if and when, at what kind of outside perspective or outside help you guys pursued while you were launching the company as a couple of engineers, basically.
Yeah. So the biggest help by far has been talking to other founders, especially in your own space, that are ahead of you in terms of the size and maturity of the company. And in our case, we were fortunate enough to talk with like unicorn founders or like even founders of some public companies in our space, kind of a 360 view of the space. So they, once you go and talk to them about your ideas and kind of what you're doing, they can easily point out flaws in your thinking and kind of give you a perspective of what they see. And having enough of your being tested and reviewed by other people enables you to see the blind spots and things that they aren't seeing, because like big companies think a bit differently than like early stage startups. I think like to come back to the strategy being a pro term, it is definitely. And like I think what I mean by that is like identifying the things that like early on you're searching for a niche, and in that niche you need to understand what's the one value proposition that every user in that niche needs. Like what's the most common problem, what's the problem that people are willing to pay for it, what's the problem that as a startup you can actually do. So some products are just too like R&D heavy to do as a startup. So you need to find a way, and like who are you going to sell it to? Is it big enterprises? Is it smaller companies? What's this? Where are most of the market at? Like, are they bigger companies, and how do you reach them? So I think the combination of all of those questions makes up the strategy.
So now that we are at the nitty gritty, I'm picturing myself if I am a developer and I'm listening to you and you are talking to me about reaching out to other people or talking to founders. How did you reach out? Did you have a lot of friends or have a network in this kind of area before, or did you have some sort of a strategy to reach out to existing founders? What do you suggest to our listeners?
So we started completely from scratch without any network of any kind, basically. But so we got lucky in terms of that we had customers in the first year of starting, and that allowed us some credibility to attract that had a network. And then those angel investors introduced us to some VC funds, and from there on, like the guy who advised me early on was like, every meeting you go into, ask 5 intros to next people. Like ask, like make them introduce 5 people to you, and then if you do that for months then the network grows exponentially, and they like people who have been in the space like have a large network, and they know who you should be talking to at any given time. So it's important to get in front of people who have the network and can see that, okay, that guy should like speak to him or her.
Right.
Started being aggressive with networking, basically.
Awesome. Would you call that aggressive, or would you just call it reaching out and hoping for the best?
Not aggressive like with communications, but just like doing it a lot and like in your intentions that you want to talk with somebody, and like those the the fund managers and like angel investors don't have a lot of time. So if you like kind of beat around the bush, then they might, it's easier to just go out and ask what you want, and sometimes they give it to you.
Right. Right. Thank you. So there are a couple other key takeaways in there. I feel like clear communications is definitely one of them. And then you talked about really reaching out for knowledge from knowledgeable people and hiring for fit for the company's tasks that people have to do. So look for a marketer for your marketing after a certain size of the company, or after a certain kind of step that you have taken. And then I also hear that it's a lot of work. It sounds like you have had to kind of become this jack of all trades in a sense. Is that right?
Yes, but it's in a really specific vertical. So maybe I'm jack of all trades in cloud monitoring space. So I know it inside and out, and I know how products work, what customers want, and how to go to market in this particular space. Maybe it transcends a bit into other types of companies, but you need to know your area like really well. Right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, because I think it makes it sound a lot less daunting than what I said sounded. So thanks for that. We are at the end of the questions that I have prepared, but I would like to ask you: is there something else or anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that it's kind of a thing with a lot of hard steps in your life that like you're afraid to take it at first, and are difficult. But even if like things don't go as planned, you're not gonna wish you didn't do it most of the time. So I encourage people to go out and try, and like if I can do it, then anyone can do it. So it's definitely like worth it, even if like you don't end up as a founder of a unicorn company. Like the life experience and the perspective it gives you is well worth it. So anyone who's interested in it, you need to have interest obviously, but definitely try. And if you want, I can maybe help.
All right. There are some other networking connections to be made there. What are some of your plans that are in the future, if you care to share?
So I think Dashbird is in a really good position at the moment in terms of feel good about the market and the product and the team. So I think in the next 1 and 2 years, it will be it might be completely a different company in terms of size and scale, and it looks like we're in the right place at the right time. So I'm looking forward to kind of reaching the next level in terms of people involved, getting more senior roles, and scaling the company. So I think that that's the only plan always as a startup founder, is to scale and to grow, obviously. I'm looking forward to that specific next stage.
Awesome, and we are looking forward to seeing that happen. With that said, where can our listeners find you if they want to follow your work or even connect with you for some mentoring?
You can reach me in LinkedIn or Twitter. I think maybe we can put the links in the description, or I don't know how it works. Or you can shoot me an email, Taavi@dashbird.io. So all of those are completely fine. And yeah, if you can find me online, then I'll do my best to answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners who are here with us. Today, my guest was Taavi Rehemägi, and he's just, I think my key takeaway is that we all need to step out of our comfort zones and try ourselves in new waters. And we talked about becoming a CEO from an engineering role. And so thanks for sharing your insights. And dearest listeners, if you have watched this video on YouTube, as opposed to only listening to the regular format on a podcast platform, please share your feedback with us so we can learn and iterate and become better. Thanks for staying with us. This was Level Up Engineering. I am Karolina Tóth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.